format. Hold it. Most recent format of our agenda doesn't have the full write-up that we always used to read. Do you think it's necessary to do that going forward? If it doesn't appear on the agenda? Richard?
Yeah, I would just sort of, let me summarize.
Okay,
Pursuant to
good.
Governor Baker's law regarding suspension of open meeting laws, we are required by that suspension to notify the public that this meeting will be recorded, and we are going to take a roll call vote to ensure that the members of the committee approve the use of this online meeting method for this meeting.
And I'll start with George. He approves. Myself, I approve. Linda. Susan? Will?
Approved.
Approved.
Joe?
Okay.
And Richard?
Yep.
Approved.
Okay, very good.
We got that technicality out of the way.
Thank you. And if I can't read other things, I'm going to ask somebody else to read. So basically, public comment. We have Stephen with us today, and if there's anything you would like to say right now, we welcome you to speak.
I'm good, thank you.
I'm sorry?
I'm good, thank you.
Oh, okay, thanks.
No comments.
Stephen, it's hard to hear you with the mask on, so you have to holler.
And the next thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the February 15th meeting. Any comments? Questions? No? Okay, so can I have a motion to approve?
I shall move.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Roll call
Aye.
vote.
Roll call, George, in favor?
In favor.
Myself in favor. Sue? In favor. Will?
Yes.
In favor. Joe?
Yes.
And Richard?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Next thing on the agenda is the site questions that we had for the administration. And right after the last meeting, Jane submitted a request for a meeting with the assistant town administrator for a short period of time, approximately a half hour, to ask about three questions that we would like to have answered, and they had to do with 3 specific sites that we expressed an interest in. And we have not been able to schedule a meeting. We suspect that it probably has to do with them getting ready for the town meeting and not being able to address anything besides the warrant articles. So that particular item, there's nothing to report on, and we'll keep at it. And hopefully after the town meeting, we'll be able to get answers to those specific questions. Any comments on that item? No, Jane?
No, I think you covered it, Linda.
Okay,
We,
but we will still continue.
I've been working with Bill Scott on a number of other topics, and I can tell you that he's running flat out at this point.
And because of that, do you think that things will open up after the meeting, or do you think it's going to
Yes.
continue?
Yes. No,
Okay.
we'll open up afterwards.
All right, thank you. The next thing is the recap of the tour that Jane and I had of the new libraries in Weymouth and Norwell. And Jane was able to write up some notes and send them to you folks. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look at them. Jane, why don't you start off with that?
I want to thank Linda for taking the entire day to take a field trip with me and to, if you can imagine, share a lot of good ideas with me on both the ride up and the ride back. It was really, I thought it was a pretty valuable use of time. We went to see the Norwell Library first. We arrived in the morning. It is in an urban environment and it looks that way. It's a giant city building.
Jane, excuse me, Jane, I believe we were at Weymouth first.
What did I say, Norwell?
Yeah, well, I think you did.
I just practiced for like 10, an hour. Okay, so
That's all right.
we went to
That's
Weymouth
all right.
first. And that's further north from here, just so you know. So we went further up north, closer to Boston, and then we came back down to Norwell on the way home. So Rob Mclean is the director at Weymouth. He has a lot of experience. He was on their library board for 16 years. He lives in Abington. He was a director in another location for a few years, and this is his 8th or 9th year in his current job. He held nothing back. He shared all details with us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I did kind of a brain dump, and I just sent it out, 20 minutes ago. So if you get a chance to read it, you'll get the details. But it was a big, spacious, bright entryway in the rear of the building. They're adjacent to a playground, and they're adjacent to an apartment building and some other location. I forget what it was. But they had kind of a tricky parking lot, a little bit on the idea of how Eastham's is, an entryway that curls around to the back of the building kind of thing. It was a very busy opening. We got there when they opened at 10 o'clock, and there was like practically a line of young mothers and strollers who were waiting to get into the children's area. And duly so, as we entered that back entry of the building, it was just magnificent. It's as if you were in a theater dedicated to learning and knowledge and creativity and culture and all that stuff. It was just kind of beautiful. They're a much larger community than we are, so they're like close to 56,000 people, give or take. They went from a 33,000 square foot building to a 50,000 square foot building. They had an unsuccessful venture trying to get a positive vote 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, whenever it was, a long time ago. I'm not saying that right, because what it was they wanted to move the location of the building from where it was. And it turned out that the neighborhood where it existed, or the village, if you want to think of it that way, was very vocal and very strong about insisting that they stay in that area. So I guess that director left, and Rob took over as the project succeeded. I can tell you like all the minutia of the details and things like that, but they essentially have a giant meeting room, and then they have a very modern way of closing off that meeting room right when you enter it, into the building, so that you can use it for after hours if you want to. Although that wasn't really something that they encouraged. And there's more details throughout my notes and all that sort of stuff. What can I tell you? They just had every modern feature that you could imagine and that you could want, including the circulation desk, where at the push of a button it raised up so that you could stand at it, or it pushed back down so that it was seating level. And it moved in 3 different parts of the desk, so you could have different heights at your circulation situation, so that you could attend to, small people, tall people, people with accessibility issues or in wheelchairs and things like that. The children's room was enormous. In both of the locations where we went, we noticed a really large children's room and a really large teenage room separate from the children's area. Just large and with huge collections. So it was pretty impressive in that aspect. A smart TV on like every other wall kind of thing, where they used a lot of technology to promote library programs or to promote community programs, or for the Friends fundraising events or whatever it was. You saw smart TVs in both locations. Some of the advice we got, because that's what happens when you go and you tour a library and you're a librarian, and both Linda and I are librarians, so you hear all the things that are wrong. So in Weymouth, Rob repeated, and we noticed in many locations that there was a dearth of storage. And he said he regrets it so much. He said, we fought and we tried and we tried to tell them to make sure we had enough storage and give us more storage and storage and storage and storage, and it didn't happen in many areas. You know, like an undersized area in the meeting room to store the tables and chairs. That's one example. Or like a trustee room that's beautiful and has great design and layout and everything, but not a telephone in the meeting room, not a counter to put your bags down, not a coat hanger to hang your coat. You know, it was just kind of sparse in places that it shouldn't have been. And then, you know, he went on and on and on with issues in terms of like when it gets to be late in the evening, they didn't have enough main lighting, like enough lighting coming from the ceiling. So they were gonna have a contractor come in and add lighting, like task lighting in various locations in the building. He said when their project was done, and it was done 18 months ago, they had a punch list of 900 items. And they're not done yet. So in Norwell, when we met with Rachel Green after we had met with Rob, she gave us many of the same types of pieces of information. She said, watch out and work carefully with your architect and your OPM to get what you want, because you have to ask the architect or you have to ask the OPM several times to make sure things get done and get heard, and don't assume anything, which I suppose is probably good project management advice. Norwell, wait, am I saying this right? Yeah, Norwell was spectacular, I thought, from a design standpoint, in that their accent walls on the exterior were Vermont slate, and it was gorgeous. So it's nice because they say it's low maintenance and they just stick it up and it stays there forever and ever. And then I think Rachel reminded us or said to us that a couple of the tiles had fallen from the sky. So you gotta be careful. Just typical new construction things. Let's see, is there anything more you want me to say, Linda, like funding and things like that?
Well, as far as going back to Weymouth, something that we can learn something from as far as what the community gains and loses when you do a project like this. At one point, there were 4 libraries in Weymouth, and we'll call the library that has just been remodeled, the main library, with 3 branches. And since they were building on the original site, they tore down the original building. They moved all of their collection to the other 3 branches so that they could continue with library services. But of course, that changed, you know, how convenient it was. But then when they reopened, when they moved into the new building, they were able to, for a variety of reasons, and I don't remember the details on it, close 2 of those branches and leave only 1 branch. And I'm not sure what size that is in, I believe, South Weymouth. So it accomplished something that, you know, they were faced with the same kind of issue as far as branches versus a single library, and how they were able to accomplish it for the town or the city, whichever it is. They also had an extremely supportive mayor who wanted to get this project done. And that's, Jane alludes to that in the notes. But that person that I think was newly elected as mayor found the money to get things going, to get them off the ground and to keep things going. So there was support from the administration in the town, which that to me was probably key to getting this project off the ground. The other thing, as far as Norwell was concerned, that I think was a highlight, I mean, they have all of the elements of a library, a modern library, but their thing that's unique, I think, are the 2 outdoor places that one is a screen porch, which is off of a magazine and reading area. And, you know, it's not huge, but it's a good size. And to be able to go out and take advantage of the outside and no bugs, and they look out on I think it's wetlands, but it's wooded. So it's beautiful out there. And that's off of one section of the building. If you go to the other end of the building, there is an outdoor, there's a deck, huge deck. That isn't screened in, but still, I mean, just the idea that you can go from the library, you're not having to leave the library building and go somewhere outside and sit on a park bench. You're actually still within the confines of the library. And one thing that they did, and I think both of them did it, for the teen space, they put the teen space near the adult space rather than near the kid space. And in Norwell, it's the library is, the entrance to the library is from a roadway that leads to the high school. And while we were there, which was after lunch, I believe, the 3 teenage boys, like seniors in high school, juniors in high school, came in to use the teen room, which I thought that was quite a thing for them to come in right after school. And evidently there's a lot of use by the teens of the teen room and the outdoor porch. So there's things that they thought of, and they did very, very well. I think we both came away from both of those places impressed with the things that they thought of to include and to give to the community. I'm sure that the buildings that were there before were very adequate as far as basic services, but not these other kinds of things that are being, thought of in new buildings. Any
They both
comments or
said-
questions?
They both said that the number of patron visits to the buildings like doubled after new construction.
Yes.
They were, delighted and thrilled for that.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions or comments?
No, as I was reading Jane's comments, I mean, Jane, I started thinking about how that would impact the library building program write-up. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
a lot of this stuff is going to end up in our next revision.
Yep. And that's
And-
what Bill Scott had said that. He said we should probably use some of this capital money that's on the ballot for this spring's town meeting to get that building program finished. Like, we did a
Yep.
good job trying to start to write it. And then the pandemic came and it needs a little modification. And I think if we got a person who has experience that's more recent, then we'll be in good stead.
Well, I was hoping that would be one of the things that we could talk about, was what is the plan for that money? Do you have a plan? It's $50,000, correct?
Correct.
Is there a plan? Did you have a plan when you submitted the request?
No, I had a conversation that directed us with that recommendation to keep the momentum of the project going, and we could use it for a variety of reasons. And one of them would be a feasibility study. And as you know, there are different definitions of what you put in a feasibility study, whether it's site location or it's what are the chances that the people will support it kind of feasibility study, or something else.
So would
We will-
$50,000 support both a rewrite of the library building program and a feasibility study?
It remains to be seen. I mean, I can do some digging and find out what other folks have paid for the various steps along the way, but I've done that before. I just pull out old notes and add, I don't know what, 10%.
I didn't hear the last thing you said.
I'll get some more specific numbers for you, but we had done it a couple of years ago when we started as the study committee to look at dollar amounts for different phases of design.
So that would become available in July, right?
Correct.
So should we have a plan in place?
Yeah, we should.
As to what do we do? We'd have to have RFQs and things like that, right?
In the notes that I sent, I put a link to the building program document that Weymouth used.
Right. Whoops. So, having said that, is that something that should be on our agenda to work on? Is that something that you will work on and present to us? Or how will we be ready to hit the road, running as of July? Jane?
I'm here.
Oh. So I mean, how do we decide how to, when to do this, to have this on our radar to do it as of July? Is that something that you have to do through the town to issue an RFQ? Should we write up the narrative that we want to put in it? Will you do that? Will they do that? How do we move forward to be ready in July? What timetable should we have?
So based on my most recent conversations with the assistant town administrator regarding library-related studies, I can assure you, or I would recommend that we work through Bill Scott's office on this. Again, it's not a case necessarily of having, so I'll call, there is a broad plan of how you would do that, but I would urge Jane to work very closely with Mr. Scott on this, because he is very effective at synthesizing this into an action plan. And if he signs up on it, if you get the Bill Scott blue screen, if things move forward, similar to what you saw at the town meeting with the wastewater project. And Will is nodding his head.
So what we can do, Linda, is we can start drafting narratives if that's what you want to do, similar to how we have already done this kind of work with our draft of the building program. But if town meeting is April 26th, and then we are able to have direct contact with the assistant town administrator, that'll give us 2 months before July 1st to have a plan in place.
All right, so as far as what the committee is going to do going forward, we're going to be ready to meet with the town assistant town administrator as like in the beginning of May. Is that what we're? And do we go to him with what we've already drafted, or talk to him first and then do what he says?
So not so much do what he says, but he is a big believer. He is a very strong believer in using expert outside parties to provide the appropriate context.
Yes.
Right. So I can tell you sort of one of the, again, I'm telling about golf because it's sort of an illustrative. So there's going to be, over the course of the next 6 months, 4 studies done. One on the turf, one on the buildings, one on the financial systems, and one on the marketing plans from National Golf. So those 4 things then become the driver that supports the long-term capital plan that's going to be voted on, hopefully, at fall town meeting. So I can see sort of that process.
So are those studies that you're talking about being done prior to July?
They're being done between now and town meeting in October.
So they have money for that. They're not waiting for the money until July.
Right, because the golf business is an enterprise.
Okay.
So it has its own surpluses.
Okay. So our timetable should be May. We start thinking about, what needs to be said in it, and then have a meeting with the assistant town administrator.
Right, so it's the same, I'm thinking about it the same way. So you go through that process of the update on the facilities, which we already have. We basically get an update from Johnson Roberts. That's facilities existing. We do I'm trying to think of what, there'd be a site evaluation process, and I'm assuming that we would hire some sort of well, probably the same Johnson Roberts, you sort of have them look at all the options that we.
Well, don't we have to put out an RFQ?
All of these things
depends.
require an RFQ.
Yeah, sometimes if you have an existing contract, so for example, on the National Golf Foundation, we actually have a rider on the old contract work that they did, so the new work is going to be done as part of that old contract. And oftentimes that's, I'm thinking Johnson Roberts had the same rider, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, no, but it's different because you're working with the MBLC and you can't talk to an architect at this stage
Right.
until you have your building program finished and
But-
even,
Yeah.
I think, site selection.
Yeah, but I'm saying.
That's why,
that- yeah.
that's why they could not do the library building program. They could only do that study.
Right, the
which-
facility study.
Yeah,
The
Right.
assessment. So that part's done. So I could take a stab at updating a timeline because we've talked about what a timeline's going to look like. But then of course, Linda, you heard it from Lauren that they're changing the protocol at the state level because of this long period of time that it's taken between grant rounds, and they're going to combine design and construction. But nobody knows what that means yet.
but I think we still have to have the library building program in a, so it can be used for the application process whenever it does get announced. And we are far from having a finished product to be able to include with the application. So that's the only reason I'm pushing to come up with a plan so that we don't let it go and then all of a sudden be scurrying at the other end for this
Feel like we're
preliminary
further
stuff.
along than you think in terms of that building program, but that's fine.
Well, that's great. That's great. If we are, I thought we kind of got stopped and, hadn't done anything, but I could be totally wrong.
No, you're right. Richard has to give me back the sections that he had.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So this is the beginning of, talking about it for this next step, I think.
Yes.
Yep. And then we'll be ready to, go forward as soon as the money becomes available, that we have the money in hand. Okay.
I also want to make note of that snow library article that you shared with us. Is it okay
Oh,
if I
yeah.
talk about that now?
Sure.
The
It's
library
good con-
director's name was nowhere near that document, nowhere near that article. It is the committee and it is the community and the
Yep.
library board that moves a
Yep.
project like this with the public support part of it. It's
Are
not-
they a private library?
Snow?
Yes.
I don't know.
I don't know myself, and Richard is shaking his head yes, and I kind of suspect they are, which is the reason why they can go ahead and push for it and don't have to wait for other support. And unfortunately, when we compare our situation to a lot of the other towns on the Cape, that's the situation that they are in too. And even though it's harder and they have to raise the money themselves or may have to, we're in a slightly different situation. And I don't know how that impacts the result, but it just goes to show that there are other people thinking the same thing, that they have to make changes. And the Snow Library has been very active from my observation in what they do for the community and their program series that they've had. It's sort of their instructional program that they have for adults. I mean, it's been very popular and it's been happening for many years. So I think they've got a good, strong presence in the community. I would guess they would have support for a project. I didn't notice, or I don't remember if it said that they would be doing things on the same site. Does anybody remember that?
Personally, I would be shocked if they didn't do it at the same site.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think it was in the article.
I don't remember that. But it just goes to show that there's going to be some competition too, because if as MBLC folks told us, if they revamp this grant process, it may be more of a need base. So, there could be competition. that
Yeah.
we need to be aware of and be ready to, plead our case. Anything more on that?
No, I think you're
Okay.
good.
All right. I'll just do a very quick recap of my visit with Carol Woodbury. I was able to we played telephone tag for quite a while, but finally I did speak with her, and I sent you a copy of my notes, and so I won't repeat all of that, but in general, it was a very positive response in the conversation. She felt that, just like in days of old when the library was downtown and it might have been near the school, I mean, she saw no problem to having a library as a neighbor on the property that is adjacent to where they're building now. She thought they could be very good neighbors. They could increase intergenerational programming. I did mention the entrance. One entrance seems like it could be off of Old Townhouse Road. I did ask her if she saw the possibility of some kind of either a joint entrance or an entrance beside the existing entrance for the new building that could go to a library. That was one of the questions that we wanted to ask the administration, would that be possible? So that the entrance would be off of Station Ave rather than Old Townhouse. She didn't know. The only problem that she could foresee was that there will be gates in fencing because of the playground. And so we would have to be aware of that. We'd have to know like spacing and stuff like that. Beyond that, she couldn't answer too many questions, those kinds of questions. But as far as philosophically, she didn't see a problem as far as safety issues or anything like that. It was not an immediate response that it wouldn't be a good thing. She did talk about the fact that with the neighbors, when they were building this building, there were issues that were brought up by the neighbors, but she felt that they were able to address and answer those issues that they had, and felt like it was a very positive exchange. Will, I don't know if you know differently about that relationship.
Which specific one, though? Just want to make sure I'm answering it right.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very general question. I think maybe it had to do with lighting. The neighbors were concerned about
Yeah.
something like that. She
Yeah,
did
because-
specifically mention.
Yeah, so there was a lighting study done, and then there's also a shadow study
Okay,
that was done on the new school, and they had to do it in different times of the year, depending on, that whole Earth around the sun thing.
mhm,
And so there's a ton of consideration involved. And I don't know if any of you have driven over there recently, but it's big.
mhm.
So
Sure is.
and that's okay because it's supposed to fit 850 kids. I mean, you can't and have and hold town meeting in the auditorium and feed them and recreate them and probably hose them down. Oh, it sounds like a shelter. Anyway, sounds like what we do here. But I guess
You can't put them up for adoption.
that's not true. There's rules. We follow the rules. We follow those rules. But so I would say, to me, I would say the thing that caught my ear when you were saying this stuff, Linda, was having to do with another entrance in from Station Ave. I would just, given all the rigmarole, and appropriately so, just to get the new traffic light, which, as you may or may not know, had many conversations at the select board. There's issues about, what time of year should the light even be active? Should it be blinking yellow in the summer, or else
Yep.
people are going to lose their minds because of traffic and everything else? Don't forget, you also have the Exit 8 project, which is looming out there. And now we're about to dump 800 children and buses and cars onto Station Avenue starting in January.
Okay,
So there's just a lot. I would say respectfully, if a library is going to go bordering the new school, I cannot imagine it having access from Station Avenue. I just can't. That doesn't mean it shouldn't, and it doesn't mean we hope it could. It just feels like there's just so many other obstacles that if there is the possibility to come in off of Old Town House, and there isn't significant neighbor opposition, two things I'm still not 100% clear on, but I'm glad to hear that the school committee doesn't, or the school superintendent is positive about. That's great.
Right. Well, it answers some questions as far as, posing possible sites. And, the pros and cons of the different sites, which, we've been trying to say, even though we've been advised to just get support. I still feel that anytime you bring it up, somebody wants to know where it's going to be, not the idea of a new library, but where are you going to put this thing if you're going to close the ones that are there? So I still feel that we need some kind of possible sites, not necessarily one. We know which one we think would be the best, but there are 3 possibilities. And so if we were able to offer those as possible sites, not definite sites, but consider it in that location, you might be able to build support. And that's why I felt at least there wasn't a no right away, that they would fight it. But I can see what you're saying. In some ways, I'm thinking, well, an entrance with the light there might be helpful for a library. But then again, you're right. It's just volume.
Not to mention, what times of day are you coming in and out of this particular existing traffic light, and what time is that library open? If they're sharing some sort of driveway, I can tell you there's already a very complicated but yet very elegant traffic flow that's going to happen in the new school. Because remember, there's also an elementary school in front of it. So and to mention a field that they're about to build, and there's still the administrative building. So again, I understand the point about the site, but I would think that the access, again, with neighbor love and best wishes, is going to be in the back. Of the Old Town House.
And so those are the pros and cons too of the site. Yeah, which we need to be able to say to people, because I've seen that site in something that Mary Wagon just sent us as far as housing. And I've forgotten now the context, and I tried to go back and find it, but I couldn't. That is one of the parcels, when they speak about where affordable housing should be put in the town, they mention that particular parcel behind the schools. So it's on the, somebody else's radar screen. Whether it would be pursued or not is another issue, but it is mentioned in print. So, I think we need to be ready to mention it too in print somehow as possible places. Any other comments? Should we move on to the next thing? Mary never joined us. So she was going to do some work on, Jane, was it looking at the sections of the library building program that she was going to work on?
That doesn't sound familiar.
After the last meeting, I thought she was going to want to look at the write-ups of the issues that were needing to be corrected in each of the existing facilities. And before the last meeting, she had not been able to do that. And I have not seen anything since, so I'm guessing she hasn't been able to address it.
Now that you say it, I remember, because it goes back to January or February, but I sent her those sections.
Yeah.
I would recommend that we just sort of table this one. We follow up with her directly, and then we'll do this at our upcoming meeting, which could be very soon.
Yes, okay, so that's the next thing we need to talk about. In general, first of all, are we going to continue with the pattern of the second Tuesday at 4 o'clock on Zoom? Is the timing working for people? Is it going to, I know. So.
But that's just me. I mean, this is not a committee of one. This is a committee.
Oh, no, I know it's not. However, how does everybody feel about it? And does that eliminate you from being able to participate?
Well, I would just say, I think monthly is plenty, but I also understand that there might be times of the year that we might need to meet more frequently. But 4:30 would be better, but I mean, again, I literally have to go, and I'm sorry about that. But
Oh, no.
but that doesn't mean I can't be an effective member. It just means I can't be here having fun with all of you all the time.
So, and again, I'm more flexible in the, later in the afternoon as well. I mean,
Do we want to put it after dinner? Early evening?
I'm
I'm
fine
gonna-
with that.
I'm sorry. How about each person going through? Because I haven't heard George, your voice, or Joe, or Sue.
Yeah, I'm flexible as well, and I feel very strongly that we should not lose Will's input into this.
Thank you for
So-
saying that. Yeah,
I think it's really, really important that Will stays on this and is able to contribute. So I'm pretty flexible as far as time is concerned.
Will,
I mean,
So-
I would be fine with like 5 or 5:30, but that also has to work for everybody.
All right.
I agree with George. I think Will's connection to the other committees that he's on is very important. And that we need to keep that so that we stay aware or they stay aware of us. So, and I'm flexible. I mean, there's times that, any time after 4 is fine with me.
Okay.
what about the week of the month? I do get jammed up sometimes because of, things related to golf, which are the second, Monday. So I was just wondering and also with the Board of Selectmen meetings.
that's right, too.
Yeah, well, the library is the third Thursday.
Right?
So for George and I, if we do something the third week, it's not really a problem, but it does
Make a
pose
long,
a little bit of an
Right.
issue.
Right.
And yours is at 5:30, right?
Yes,
right, so do we put a stake in the ground second? We'll do it the second shoot.
That's what we've been doing. Joe, have you got any thoughts on it?
I can do it either very early or anytime after 4. Tuesday's good for me, but the day of the week doesn't matter.
Yeah, Tuesday's okay for me too. Will?
What
I
if we
prefer
did?
I
Go
prefer
ahead.
Tuesday just because planning board is Wednesday. Thursday's board game night. Can't do that.
Right, so Tuesday, I'm just saying.
What if we did the first Tuesday?
Yeah, the week of the month doesn't affect me at all.
Nor I'm.
What about you, Richard?
I like the first week of the month. I would prefer that.
Okay, so let's put.
But
a
it would
stake-
be the first Tuesday. It might be the second week, but it could be the first Tuesday of the month.
Right,
Does that work?
right.
yeah,
Yes.
All right, my apologies, but I literally have to go.
That's
Um,
okay.
I'm sorry,
No, we'll-
but I
we'll-
appreciate you. I appreciate everybody including me and wanting to keep me included.
Yes.
And
Okay.
if you want to know what animals are for adoption, you have to look on the website. I'm not going to tell you. No secret information coming from me about which
No insider trading.
which color puppy, you got to come and you got to see them, or you have to look on the website. Okay.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you
take
all.
care.
Be well. Bye-bye.
You also.
Bye, good
Well-
to see you.
All
So
right.
that would be potentially, if I did the math right, would be April 3rd.
April 5,
No,
it's
it
next
would
week.
be April 5th.
I mean, not April, I would go to March. I mean, since we have just gotten together, I would go to May 3rd,
Yeah,
Yep.
okay?
So you
that's
wanna do
after
that?
town meeting.
Well, we'll know more also.
Right, but I'm
Yeah.
worried about that FAQ document and I want some feedback on it.
Well, you
Yeah,
can-
okay, but so we've decided on May 3rd at what time?
5:30,
5:30?
that's what I
5:30.
heard.
That's good.
And we're gonna
Yep.
stick with Zoom, right?
For right now. Well,
Okay.
especially because again, Will, I mean, He's got.
I know.
camp is- yeah, so I'm all for the Zoom.
Okay, fine with me. All right, so Jane, you have the floor as far as the FAQ.
Well, I want it to be updated for spring town meeting, and I think that was what we had in mind. So
Yes,
last meeting, I wrote up 4 draft questions based on those great ones that George had suggested, and I didn't get any feedback from anybody. So are you just going to take whatever I say and put it into these documents? Because that makes me nervous. Did I pick the right questions? Are there other questions you would rather see? I thought I would repeat the ones that we already have, but add a couple more each time. But I may have to go to like a bigger document. It's 4 pages now, 1 page folded in half, 4 pieces, but it's going to get long.
You can always distill to excellence, as they say.
Right, and I did cut a lot of what we had passed off last October, so in order to fit more in this new one for the spring. But again, I mean, I haven't heard from anybody, so I want to know if maybe I'm going in the right direction or maybe I'm not.
did folks have a chance to look at it before the meeting?
I
Did
did
you
not.
notice?
No,
Okay, everybody has a task then between now and the end of the week to get back to Jane on that, okay?
Because we need
Got it.
time to be able to write it up and get it printed.
Right.
And if
So
you
the
have any other
question-
thoughts,
So the
one of the
question is, are we asking the right questions in this go round? Because I feel like we're already getting a little too specific and we'll turn people off.
Right.
So are there better questions or more general questions at this phase that you think should be there? And again, George had some really good ones from whatever, January that you shared with us.
when you say too specific, how should we not be specific? That's what I have trouble with.
Like I could start a whole litany of what's wrong with this building. Like I've seen that in a lot of library websites. When they're doing the timeline, the early questions are, well, what's wrong? And Mary says that all the time. She's like, I want to know that, you don't have a bathroom on the basement floor, that you don't have any place to park the strollers, that you don't have enough staff workspace, that you don't, the electrical outlets.
Right.
Really
If you think
general.
if you think about.
I
the-
agree with that.
What's that?
I
didn't
agree
hear-
with that.
Well, I do too.
Yeah, I think, again, we need to continue to build the burning fire right now.
All right, so let me do a bit of a draft about what's wrong with this facility. And maybe Mary can help in that regard, Linda.
Right.
I think
And
that was
also
her
too-
intention. I'm just not sure, if maybe we need to distill like the area and work on one area at a time. The other thing is, as you were saying, size, could we ever do anything with, what's the larger, legal size and fold it in such a way? I mean, I don't,
Oh, yeah.
logistically,
No,
that
you
would give
totally
us a
can.
little more space.
You totally can.
And give us a little bit more space to, add more things and fold it in such a way that it can be more like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Trifold type of thing.
You could go to 11 by 17 and fold it, and then you'd have 4 8.5 by 11 sheets. But we're not at that stage yet. You also kind of
Well-
want to make it look consistent with what you've done before, so people know what they're looking at. Oh, look, there's the FAQ document.
Yeah, but how many opportunities are we going to have to pass out something like this? Are we going to be adding to it each time, or are we going to be substituting each time? That's what I don't know what our purpose is.
I have a pile that's at my front desk that we've run out of because people have taken them. There was a pile at town hall that I think last I saw there was 1 left. You just need to keep the things available to the public wherever they may
Right.
land.
But if we have this size handout, it can't grow. Or you have to say it in a shorter format, each one in a shorter format. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To be able to fit them all on.
Right. I
As
mean,
we-
you don't have to think about that because we're going to put all the questions on the website as well. So you don't have to
Right.
think about it for the online content, but for the print content you do.
Exactly. That's what I mean for the print.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that we think of should be on the online.
Yeah.
But for the print.
Yeah.
Are you being more selective, or do you want to have just as much in print as you have online?
I think it should be consistent and the same actual language. Otherwise, people are going to think you're being manipulative. All right, Linda, I'll figure it out in terms of the size and all that sort of stuff. And then I guess we'll just have to rattle Mary's cage again, because you're right. She was going to start writing that up.
And maybe if something gets written and sent to her, like, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
Does this answer some of the questions you had?
Yeah.
That she would be able to tackle it.
Yeah.
The other thing that Mary did do was she responded to something that Mary Wagon sent about the grants.
Yeah.
And Jane, I know you responded to her. Is
Yeah.
that something that you would be able to take advantage of?
I don't know. I never thought that the CDBG grant would be something that we would need to look into, but Mary may have different experience than I do with it. I mean,
Well,
every time we talk to the public, folks, we need to answer their question about either why we're going to repair this building, why we care about this building, and why we're going to add bathrooms to it or whatever, versus new construction.
Right.
It always just keeps going round and round and round in circles. So
Right.
I don't know if we got CDBG money, I would say that we're doing it as a, an improvement so that it improves our resale value when we
Yeah.
relocate.
Well, and I think it was very specific when Mary answered it, that it could only apply to South. And it would be for things that would improve the building for the public, like add a ramp, for accessibility and things like that. So nothing jumped out at me other than a bathroom in the basement floor.
Right.
That would be an improvement for the public. That wouldn't be a major thing. And even that, I don't know that they could afford to do that. And I don't know where they'd put it.
Right. Or reworking the parking lots, that would be something that you would think would be helpful to the public.
Yeah,
Making
if
more
possible.
parking
Yeah.
spaces.
Yeah. So I guess that's in your lap now. I don't feel as though this committee would be the one to do that. Do you?
I don't know. It's facility, improving, what is the mission? Improving library services and staffing and facilities.
But it seems as though it would be the library that would apply for it.
Probably. That's why I really wasn't thinking that it would be something that people would.
Maybe
Fine
that's a
to be.
specific question you should ask Mary Wagon, who actually applies for it.
Okay. Yeah.
And then
plus,
we'd know.
right. And plus that Mary Reardon reached out to her is kind of nice. So then maybe they had that conversation and MRJ needs to share it with us.
I don't know. Yeah.
But
I mean,
that's good thinking.
the bigger context for all of this is that the Capital Planning Committee has asked or recommended that all public building, the envelope of public buildings be considered as a strategic whole and as analyzed as a strategic whole, so that they're not making little one-off decisions for building X and department Y.
Richard, what did you say? A strategic what?
Facilities envelope review assessment. So basically taking a holistic view of all the town's buildings versus all the town's needs.
Right.
So that was one of the capital budget committee's recommendations. Same thing they were saying on fleets. Don't come to us with all these little, this guy needs a car, this guy needs a truck. There should be a fleet management program that factors this in. And the big thing that they want to do is stop funneling recurring known maintenance items through the capital planning process, as opposed to running it straight through the operating budgets, the general fund budgets.
But isn't that the purpose of these grants, to use them for very specific purposes? So otherwise, then the money doesn't get used unless you have a project, then you apply.
So I think so that's where, so continue that thought process. So rather than having individual departments who aren't experts in doing grants for buildings, you have the facilities, the public buildings, public works folks who do that all the time and figure out how to get those grants for specific buildings.
Right.
But Mary Wagon is the one that put out this information about this money being available and said if anybody has projects to apply.
Yeah,
So somehow communication, yeah.
Unless DPW takes the information and synthesizes it into one plan, like Richard said, and I've heard that, Richard, about like the whatever, the cohesiveness that needs to be
right.
applied
There
to capital
shouldn't
development.
be a surprise that a building needs a roof replaced.
Right.
You multiply 30 years out, and that's when the roof needs to be replaced.
Right.
Okay, so it seems to me though that it should be in your lap, Jane, to know about that and to be, I mean, we can always help you with writing it up
fine.
for our suggestions.
That's great.
Don't you think? I mean, then there's a communication with the town.
Yep.
Okay, well, unless there's anything else, it seems like we have covered everything unless anybody wants to bring something else up.
Concerns of the membership, of the committee members. Does anybody have any? Okay.
Okay,
Make a
so,
motion to adjourn.
and yes, all right.
Move.
Okay.
I move to
okay.
adjourn.
Okay, do we have a second?
A second.
All right, and so then we all have to roll call.
Right.
Sue, you approve?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Linda? Yes. Joe?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Again, you'll get the minutes from this meeting, hopefully, this week, because if I don't do it this week, it's going to be a problem. And we'll be meeting again at the beginning of May.
Okay.
May 30, 5:30, right?
Right, 5:30 start time.
Thanks,
Very
you
good.
guys. Thanks, everyone.
All right,
Thank you,
talk to soon.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.